Welcome back, dear friends. Before we begin, let me know where in the world you are watching. And please don't forget to subscribe and like to support the channel. Imagine, if you will, that everything you have ever known is a lie. Not a deliberate deception, but something far more profound and unsettling. Imagine that the world you inhabit, the reality you trust, the very foundation of your existence, is nothing more than shadows dancing on a wall. And worse still, imagine that you have no idea you are watching shadows. You believe with absolute certainty that these flickering shapes are the totality of existence, the fullness of what is real. This is not science fiction. This is not a thought experiment from our modern age of virtual reality and digital illusion. This vision comes from a man who lived 2,400 years ago in the golden age of Athens, when the world was still young and philosophy had barely learned to speak its own name. His name was Plato, and he saw something that almost no one else could see. He saw that we live in a cave. But before we descend into that cave, before we confront the shadows that define our existence, we must understand the man who first imagined this prison and dared to describe the painful journey toward freedom. We must meet Plato himself, a figure whose influence on human thought cannot be overstated. The philosopher Alfred North Whitehead once remarked that all of Western philosophy is merely a series of footnotes to Plato. This is not hyperbole. It is perhaps the most accurate description of 24 centuries of human thinking. The year is 428 before the Common Era. Athens is at the height of its power and the beginning of its decline. The city gleams with marble temples, the Parthenon standing proud on the Acropolis, a monument to human achievement and divine aspiration. The streets buzz with merchants, soldiers, slaves, and free citizens engaged in the grand experiment of democracy. Philosophy walks these same streets, still finding its footing, still learning what questions to ask. Into this world, a child is born to an aristocratic family. His father traces his lineage to the last king of Athens. His mother descends from Solon, the great lawgiver who laid the foundations of Athenian democracy. They name him Aristocles, but the world will know him by another name, Plato. Some say this nickname came from his wrestling coach, referring to his broad shoulders and chest. Others claim it derives from the breadth of his forehead, or perhaps the breadth of his ideas. The truth is lost to time, but the name endures. Plato, broad, expansive, comprehensive. Young Aristocles grows up in a world torn by war. The Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta defines his childhood, a conflict that will ultimately humble Athens and shatter its dreams of empire. He receives the education befitting his station, studying music and poetry, mathematics and gymnastics. He writes tragic dramas, they say, and shows promise as a poet. But then something happens that changes everything. He meets a man who will alter not only his life but the entire trajectory of human thought. The man is Socrates, ugly, pug-nosed, with bulging eyes and a protruding belly. He wanders the marketplace barefoot, engaging anyone who will listen in conversation. But these are not ordinary conversations. Socrates asks questions. Simple questions, or so they seem. At first, what is justice? What is virtue? What is knowledge? And then he listens as his conversation partners attempt to answer. And then he asks more questions, and more, and slowly, methodically, gently. He reveals that no one actually knows what they claim to know. The confident sophist is reduced to confusion. The self-assured politician admits his ignorance. The respected craftsman realizes he cannot define his own craft. This is what Socrates does. He exposes ignorance disguised as wisdom. And he does it not out of malice, but out of a genuine love of truth and a belief that wisdom begins only when we admit we know nothing. When young Plato encounters Socrates, something fundamental shifts in his soul. The poetry he has been writing suddenly seems hollow. The political career his family envisions for him seems pointless. He burns his tragic dramas, according to legend, and becomes a devoted follower of this strange, questioning man. For 8 years, perhaps longer, Plato learns at the feet of Socrates. He learns to question, to probe, to never accept easy answers. He learns that the unexamined life is not worth living. He learns that true knowledge is not accumulated facts, but the understanding of eternal truths that exist beyond the flux of daily experience. And then, in 399 BCE, Athens makes a terrible mistake. The democracy that Socrates has questioned, the citizens he has challenged, turn against him. They charge him with impiety and corrupting the youth. The charges are transparently political, a way to silence a voice that has become too uncomfortable, too probing, too honest. Socrates is convicted. He is sentenced to death. Plato is there or nearby as his teacher faces this injustice with perfect calm. Socrates refuses to flee, though his friends arrange his escape. He refuses to compromise his principles, though compromise might save his life. Instead, he spends his final hours discussing the immortality of the soul with his friends, comforting them rather than seeking comfort for himself. And then he drinks the hemlock poison, the execution method prescribed by Athenian law, and dies with the same composure he showed in life. This event traumatizes Plato. How could the city that gave birth to philosophy murder the greatest philosopher? How could democracy, ruled by the people, result in such profound injustice? These questions haunt him. They drive him. They become the engine of his philosophical project. In the years following Socrates' death, Plato travels. He visits Egypt, studying the ancient wisdom preserved in that timeless land. He journeys to southern Italy and Sicily, encountering the Pythagoreans with their mystical mathematics and their belief in the transmigration of souls. He observes different forms of government, different ways of organizing human society, different answers to the question of how we should live. And then he returns to Athens. He is approximately 40 years old. He purchases a piece of land in a grove sacred to the hero Academus, outside the city walls. There, in 387 BCE, he establishes a school. He calls it simply the Academy. It is not the first school in Athens, but it will become the most important. It will operate continuously for 900 years, until the Christian, Roman Emperor Justinian closes it in 529 CE, believing it a threat to the new faith. But those 9 centuries will change the world. At the Academy, Plato teaches. But more importantly, he writes. Over the next 4 decades, he composes dialogues, dramatic conversations that bring philosophy to life. Most feature Socrates as the main character, engaging in the kinds of discussions that so fascinated young Plato. But these are not transcripts of actual conversations. Plato is not recording history. He is doing philosophy, exploring ideas, testing arguments, following truth wherever it leads. Through these dialogues, Plato constructs a comprehensive philosophical system that addresses every major question humans can ask. What is reality? What can we know? How should we live? What happens when we die? What is justice? What is beauty? What is love? The breadth of his thought is staggering. No area of human concern escapes his attention. But at the center of everything, underlying all his specific arguments and proposals, stands one fundamental insight, one vision that makes sense of all the rest. It is the insight that gave birth to the allegory we are about to explore, the vision that explains why we live in a cave and what we must do to escape it. Plato sees that the world we experience through our senses, the world of particular things that come into being and pass away, is not the deepest level of reality. There is something beyond, something more real than the physical objects we touch and see. There are eternal, unchanging forms or ideas that exist in a realm beyond space and time. These forms are the true reality, and everything we experience in the physical world is merely a copy, an imitation, a shadow of these perfect archetypes. This might sound abstract, even mystical. But Plato is not being vague or mystical. He is being precise. He is observing that we recognize instances of things, equality or justice or beauty, only because we have some prior knowledge of equality itself, justice itself, beauty itself. We judge particular just acts by reference to justice. We recognize beautiful things by reference to beauty. These universal standards cannot come from our experience of imperfect particulars. They must come from somewhere else. They must exist somewhere else. And if they exist somewhere else, then that somewhere else must be more real, more fundamental than the world of our sensory experience. This is the foundation. This is the insight that makes everything else make sense. And it is this insight that gives birth to the most famous, most influential, most profound allegory in the history of philosophy. The allegory that begins now as we descend together into the cave where humanity has always dwelt, where we have always been prisoners, and where most of us will remain for our entire lives unless something miraculous happens. So settle in. Let your breathing slow. Prepare yourself for a journey from darkness to light, from ignorance to knowledge, from comfortable illusion to painful truth. Prepare yourself to discover that you have been living in a cave. And more than that, prepare yourself to discover what it might mean to climb toward the light. There is a cave, deep underground, a vast cavern carved from living rock. The entrance lies far above, so distant that its light barely penetrates the depths below. And in this cave, in the deepest, darkest section, there are prisoners. These prisoners have been here since childhood. Some were born here. They have never known anything else. They sit in a row, facing a blank stone wall, their necks shackled so they cannot turn their heads. Their legs are bound so they cannot walk. They cannot move. They cannot look away from the wall before them. This wall is their entire world. Behind the prisoners, perhaps 30 feet back, a fire burns. Its flames cast light and heat, providing the only illumination in this underground darkness. Between the fire and the prisoners runs a low wall, like a puppet theatre screen, about waist high. And along this wall, other people, free people, carry objects back and forth. Statues of animals, models of trees, representations of people, all manner of carved figures. These puppet masters hold their objects above the wall as they walk, casting shadows from the fire onto the wall that the prisoners face. The prisoners see these shadows. They see the silhouettes of animals moving across the stone. They see the outlines of trees and people. They hear echoes bouncing off the walls, the voices of the puppet masters behind them, though they believe these sounds come from the shadows themselves. And because the prisoners have never seen anything else, because they have no other reference point, no other experience to compare this to, they believe the shadows are real. They believe the shadows are the totality of existence. Imagine their world for a moment. Imagine knowing nothing but these shifting shapes on a wall. You would develop an entire understanding of reality based on shadows. You would become expert at predicting which shadow would appear next. You would notice patterns, regularities. You might even develop a primitive science of shadows, creating theories about why they behave as they do. The prisoner who could best predict the shadows would be honored as wise. The one who understood shadow patterns most deeply would be considered the greatest thinker in your community. And you would never, could never suspect that these shadows are merely representations of representations. That the carved figures casting the shadows are themselves imitations of real objects. That the entire reality you know is third-hand at best, removed by multiple layers from true being. You would have no vocabulary for truth, no concept of reality beyond the shadows. The shadows would be your truth. The shadows would be your reality. This is Plato's vision of the human condition. This is how he sees us, not metaphorically, not as mere illustration. He genuinely believes that most of humanity lives exactly like these prisoners, convinced that the shifting appearances we perceive through our senses represent ultimate reality, unaware that there is something more real, more true, more fundamental than anything we can see or touch. The cave is not just ancient Athens. The cave is not just the historical moment Plato inhabited. The cave is the world. The cave is now. The cave is always. The cave is the condition of embodied existence, of souls trapped in physical form, perceiving shadows and mistaking them for substance. But then something extraordinary happens. One prisoner is freed. We are not told how. Perhaps the chains simply break. Perhaps a liberator comes from outside. Perhaps the prisoner somehow works himself free through years of patient effort. The how does not matter. What matters is the moment of freedom and what follows. The freed prisoner turns his head. For the first time in his life, he can look away from the wall. And immediately he is confused. His eyes, accustomed only to the dim shadows on stone, cannot process what he sees. The fire behind him is too bright. It hurts. He squints, turns away, wants desperately to return to the comfortable familiarity of the shadows. But something, curiosity perhaps, or fate, or the hand of a guide, compels him to keep looking. Gradually, painfully, his eyes adjust. He begins to see the fire clearly. He sees the wall where the puppet masters walk. He sees the carved figures they carry. And, slowly, with mounting shock, he realizes that the shadows he has watched his entire life are not real things, but projections. The solid reality he trusted was never solid at all. It was always derivative, always dependent on something more primary. This realization is not pleasant. It is not a joyful epiphany. It is disorienting, frightening, threatening to every assumption he has ever held. The entire structure of his understanding collapses. Everything he thought he knew reveals itself as ignorance. And the natural response, the human response, is to reject this knowledge, to turn back toward the shadows, to cling to the comfortable lie rather than embrace the painful truth. But something prevents him from turning back. Perhaps that same curiosity. Perhaps a guide who will not let him retreat. Perhaps an inner strength he did not know he possessed, and so he continues. He turns toward the passage leading upward, toward the distant entrance of the cave, toward the light bleeding down from above, and he begins to climb. The journey is arduous, the path is steep, the rock is sharp, and with every step the light grows brighter, more painful to his cave-adjusted eyes. He stumbles. He falls. He wants to quit, to descend back to the familiar darkness where the shadows make sense and his eyes do not ache. But he continues, one foot in front of the other, one handhold after another, upward, always upward. And then, after what feels like an eternity of climbing, he reaches the mouth of the cave. He emerges into the world above. And he is completely, utterly, overwhelmingly blinded. The sun. The actual sun, not the fire's pale imitation, floods his vision with light more intense than anything he has ever experienced. He cannot see. He cannot process this. His eyes, those organs that defined his entire relationship with reality, have become useless. He falls to his knees, shielding his face, certain that this light will destroy him, that leaving the cave was a terrible mistake, that the shadows were better than this burning blindness. But slowly, so slowly, his eyes adjust to this new world. At first, he can only look at shadows even here. The shadows of trees, of animals, of other people. These shadows are different from the ones in the cave, sharper somehow, more defined, but still shadows. Then he progresses to reflections. He looks at a pond and sees the reflection of the sky, the mirror image of trees. These reflections are one step closer to reality than shadows, but still not the things themselves. Gradually, as day follows day, and his eyes grow stronger, he can look at actual objects in the light of day. He sees a real tree, not its shadow or reflection, but the tree itself. He sees an actual animal, flesh and blood and movement. He sees other human beings, not silhouettes on a wall, but living, breathing people. and each sight fills him with wonder and also with horror. Wonder at the richness and complexity of true reality, horror at how impoverished his previous understanding was, how much he mistook shadows for substance. Finally, after weeks or months of gradual adjustment, he can look at the sky in daytime. He sees the sun itself, the source of all light, the power that illuminates everything else and makes vision possible. And in seeing the sun, he understands. He understands that this is the ultimate reality, the final source, the thing that makes everything else visible and comprehensible. Without the sun, nothing could be seen. Without this light, no truth could be known. The sun is to the visible world what the form of the good is to the intelligible realm. It is the source and standard of everything. This freed prisoner has completed a philosophical journey. He has ascended from ignorance to knowledge, from opinion to understanding, from the many changing particulars to the one eternal truth. He has become a philosopher in the truest sense, a lover of wisdom who has actually attained the wisdom he loves. He has seen reality as it is, not as it appears. He has escaped the cave. And now comes the most important question, the question that defines not just this allegory, but the entire purpose of philosophy and the entire responsibility of those who attain truth. What should he do? Should he remain in the sunlight, basking in his knowledge, enjoying the blessed vision of reality, denied to those still in chains below? Should he spend his days contemplating the sun and the truth it represents, living in perfect understanding while his former fellow prisoners remain in darkness? No, this is not what he does. This is not what he should do. Because knowledge without compassion is empty. Truth without love is sterile. Understanding that does not attempt to liberate others is a form of selfishness disguised as wisdom. And so, despite the comfort of the light, despite the pain he knows awaits him, the freed prisoner makes a choice. He turns away from the sun. He walks back toward the mouth of the cave. He begins the descent. Going down is in some ways harder than climbing up. He is moving from light to darkness now, and his eyes, so recently adjusted to the sun, must readjust to shadow. He stumbles in the dimness. He cannot see clearly in the cave, even though he once navigated its darkness perfectly. He has become, in a sense, less capable than those who never left, at least in the realm of shadows. He reaches the bottom. He approaches his former fellow prisoners, still chained, still watching the wall, still utterly convinced that shadows are reality, and with great excitement, with joy at the truth he has discovered, and eagerness to share this gift, he tells them what he has seen. He describes the fire, the carved figures, the passage upward, the world outside, the actual trees and animals, the sun itself. He explains that the shadows are not real, that true reality exists beyond this cave, that they are prisoners who could be free. And the prisoners laugh at him. They mock him. They call him mad. Look at his eyes, they say. He went away and came back damaged. He can barely see the shadows now. He who once was honored as wise among us can no longer even predict which shadow will appear next. He trips over stones in plain sight. He cannot function in the real world, the world of shadows that we all know is reality. Whatever he experienced, outside has ruined him. It has made him useless, and if any of us were to follow him, we would be similarly destroyed. More than mockery, there is anger. His words threaten their entire understanding of reality. If he is right, then everything they believe is wrong. If he is right, then their lives are based on illusion, their honors are meaningless, their wisdom is ignorance. This is not a comfortable thought. This is not something they can easily accept. And so they reject it. They reject him. And Plato tells us that if they could get their hands on him, if they could reach him with their chained limbs, they would kill him. They would murder the one who tried to free them, the one who offered them truth, because the truth is more threatening than any lie, and liberation is more terrifying than any chain. This is the allegory. This is Plato's vision of the human condition and the philosopher's mission. We are the prisoners. The cave is the physical world, the realm of sensory experience, the domain of changing, temporal, imperfect particulars. The shadows are the objects we perceive through our senses, things that seem real but are actually images of something more fundamental. The fire is the sun in the physical world, providing the limited light by which we perceive shadows. The sea, ascent from the cave, is the journey of the soul toward true knowledge. The world outside is the realm of forms, the domain of eternal, unchanging, perfect reality. And the sun itself is the form of the good, the ultimate reality that makes all other knowledge possible. The freed prisoner is the philosopher, the rare individual who breaks free from conventional opinion and sensory illusion to attain genuine understanding. And his return to the cave is the philosopher's duty to attempt, however futilely, however dangerously, to liberate others from the chains of ignorance. Plato is not being poetic here. He is not speaking metaphorically. He genuinely believes that most humans live their entire lives in a state comparable to those prisoners, perceiving only shadows, believing only in the evidence of their senses, never questioning whether there might be something more real beyond their immediate experience. We mistake the changing flux of particulars for reality. We believe that what we see with our eyes and hear with our ears and touch with our hands is the fullness of what exists. We honor those who are best at navigating the world of shadows, the successful business people, the clever politicians, the skilled craftspeople. And we ignore or mock or even murder those who try to tell us that there is something beyond shadows, something more real, something that would require us to question everything we think we know. But Plato's allegory does not end in despair. It ends with a mission. The philosopher must return to the cave, not because it is easy, not because it is safe, not because it will be appreciated, but because it is right, because knowledge creates responsibility, because those who see the truth are obligated to attempt, however imperfectly, to help others see it too. This is the essence of Plato's vision. This is the heart of his philosophy, and every argument he makes, every proposal he offers, every dialogue he writes, flows from this central insight. We live in a cave. Most of us will remain in the cave, but some can escape, and those who escape must try to free the others, even knowing that the attempt will likely fail, even knowing that it might cost them everything. Now, as you rest in the darkness behind your closed eyes, consider this. What are the shadows on your personal wall? What comfortable illusions define your understanding of reality? What would it mean for you to turn away from the wall, to face the fire, to climb toward the light? What truths have you been avoiding because accepting them would require you to abandon everything you think you know? These are not easy questions. They are not meant to be. The allegory of the cave is not meant to comfort. It is meant to challenge, to disturb, to awaken. It is meant to make you wonder whether you are living in truth or merely in the most convincing lies you have ever encountered. But there is hope in this vision too. The chains can be broken. The ascent is possible. The sun can be seen. Reality can be known. And once known, that knowledge changes everything. It makes the shadows lose their power. It makes the cave less confining. It makes the truth, however painful, preferable to the most comfortable lie. This is Plato's gift. Not easy answers, not simple solutions, but a vision of human possibility that refuses to accept that shadows are all we can know, that the cave is all we can inhabit, that ignorance is the natural and permanent condition of humanity. The cave has an exit. The question is whether we have the courage to find it. If the allegory of the cave describes our condition, the theory of forms explains why we are in this condition and what exists beyond the cave walls. It is Plato's most distinctive contribution to philosophy, his attempt to solve the deepest riddles of existence, knowledge, and value. And while the theory of forms can seem abstract at first encounter, it addresses the most concrete and practical questions we can ask. What is real? How do we know anything? Why are some things better than others? Let us begin with a simple observation. The kind of thing so obvious we usually never think about it. You recognize instances of things. You see multiple dogs and know they are all dogs, despite vast differences in size, color, and shape. You see multiple circles and know they are all circles, despite being drawn in different sizes and materials. You encounter multiple just acts and recognize them all as just, despite differences in circumstance and culture. This capacity for recognition, this ability to identify many particular instances as examples of one universal type, is so basic to human thought that we rarely question it. But Plato questions it. How do you do this? How do you know that a Chihuahua and a Great Dane are both dogs when they share almost no physical characteristics? How do you know that a circle drawn in sand and a circle drawn on paper are both circles when they are made of completely different substances? How do you recognize justice when you see it, given that just acts take infinitely varied forms? The obvious answer, the one most people would give, is that we learn from experience. We see many dogs and abstract the common features that make them all dogs. We encounter circles repeatedly and extract the essential characteristics that define circularity. We observe just acts and induce the general principles of justice. But Plato sees a fatal flaw in this explanation. Before you can recognize multiple things as instances of the same type, you must already have some understanding of what that type is. Before you can abstract the concept of dog from multiple dogs, you must already know what you are looking for. You must already possess some standard, some template, some idea of dogness that allows you to recognize these particular animals as examples of the same kind. Consider a child learning the word dog. The parent points to the family pet and says, dog. The child forms some understanding, but then the child encounters the neighbor's dog, which looks completely different. Smaller, different color, different shape. Yet somehow the child recognizes that this too is a dog. How? If the child was simply memorizing the physical features of the first dog and calling anything similar a dog, he would fail, because the second dog might share almost no features with the first, yet the child succeeds. The child recognizes dogness in both animals. Plato argues that this is possible only if the child, indeed all of us, already possess innate knowledge of what a dog is in its essential nature. Not knowledge of this or that particular dog, not a memory of specific physical features, but knowledge of dog itself, the form of dog, the perfect, eternal, unchanging archetype, of which all particular dogs are imperfect, temporary, changing, copies. This might sound mystical, but Plato is being rigorously logical. The alternative, that we build up universal concepts purely from sensory experience, cannot account for how we successfully apply these concepts to new instances that share no obvious perceptual features with previous instances. Something must provide the standard by which we judge whether new instances belong to the category, and that something cannot come from the instances themselves, because they are too varied, too particular, too changing to serve as stable standards. Therefore, Plato concludes there must exist forms. These forms are not physical objects. They do not exist in space or time. They are not accessible to the senses. You cannot see the form of dog, or touch the form of justice, or taste the form of beauty. Yet they are real. In fact, they are more real than any physical object you can perceive. Because physical objects come into being and pass away. They change constantly. They are never perfect, but the forms are eternal, unchanging, and perfect. They are, in Plato's technical language, what truly is, while physical objects only partially participate in being. Let us take a different example to make this clearer. Consider equality. You have seen many instances of equal things. 2 sticks of equal length, 2 stones of equal weight, 2 portions of equal size. You recognize these instances as equal. You can point to them and say, these are equal. But have you ever seen equality itself? Have you ever encountered perfect, absolute equality in the physical world? Plato would say no, Every instance of equality you perceive through your senses is imperfect, approximate. Two sticks that appear equal always differ at some microscopic level. Two stones that feel equal on a rough scale show differences on a precise balance. Every physical instance of equality is, upon close enough examination, not quite equal. And yet you possess a concept of perfect equality, a standard by which you judge these imperfect instances and find them wanting. Where does this standard come from? Not from sensory experience, because sensory experience only gives you imperfect examples. It must come from somewhere else. There must exist equality itself, the form of equality, the perfect standard that particular equal things strive toward, but never fully achieve. And you must have some innate knowledge of this form, some pre-existing acquaintance with perfect equality, that allows you to recognize imperfect instances and understand them as attempts, however inadequate, to embody the form. This is true not just for geometric or mathematical concepts, though those provide the clearest examples. It is true for all the fundamental categories that structure our understanding of reality. There is a form of beauty, and all beautiful things are beautiful only insofar as they participate in this form. There is a form of justice, and all just acts are just only to the degree they approximate this eternal standard. There is a form of goodness, and all good things derive whatever goodness they possess from their relationship to the form of the good. These forms exist in their own realm, what Plato sometimes calls the intelligible world, to distinguish it from the sensible world of physical objects. The forms are not scattered throughout space, competing for room with tables and trees. They exist in a different mode entirely, accessible not to the eyes of the body, but to the eyes of the soul, to reason, to intellect. And here we come to the crucial point, the insight that makes the theory of forms not just an abstract metaphysical doctrine, but a practical guide to living. If the forms are more real than physical objects, and if true knowledge is knowledge of what is most real, then true knowledge is knowledge of forms, not of particulars. The person who has perfect perception of the physical world, but no understanding of forms is less knowledgeable than the person who understands forms, but cannot perceive the physical world clearly. The blind mathematician who understands the form of circle knows more about reality than the sighted person who has seen 10,000 circles but understands nothing of what makes them circular. This explains the ascent from the cave. The prisoner chained before shadows is perceiving images of physical objects. When he turns and sees the carved figures, he is perceiving physical objects themselves. When he climbs out of the cave and sees trees and animals in sunlight, he is perceiving physical objects more clearly, illuminated by the sun rather than by fire. But he has not yet achieved true knowledge. He is still in the realm of the sensible, still perceiving with his bodily senses, rather than understanding with his soul's reason. True knowledge comes only when he uses these physical perceptions as stepping stones to something higher. When he sees many beautiful things and asks himself what beauty itself must be, if all these beautiful things are beautiful by participating in it. When he encounters multiple just acts and seeks to understand justice itself, the form that all just acts imperfectly reflect. This movement from particulars to universals, from instances to forms, from the many to the one, is the essence of philosophical thinking. It is the path from opinion to knowledge, from belief to understanding. And at the pinnacle of this ascent, beyond and above all other forms, stands one form that Plato calls the form of the good. This is the sun in the Allegory, the ultimate reality that makes all other reality comprehensible. Just as the sun provides the light by which we see physical objects, the form of the good provides the intelligibility by which we understand all other forms. It is the source of being and the source of knowledge. Without it, nothing else could exist or be known. What exactly is the form of the good? Plato admits this is the hardest question to answer. He offers analogies, comparisons, suggestions, but he insists that the form of the good transcends precise definition. It is beyond being itself, he says mysteriously. beyond even existence. It is the principle that makes existence possible and intelligible and valuable. Perhaps the best way to understand the form of the good is through its effects. Everything that exists participates in the good to some degree, which is what makes it exist rather than not exist. Everything we can know is knowable because it participates in the good, because the good provides the structure and order that makes knowledge possible. Everything we value as good, whether pleasure or virtue or beauty or truth, is valuable precisely because it participates, however imperfectly, in the form of the good. The philosopher's ultimate goal is to ascend beyond knowledge of particular forms to understanding of the form of the good itself. This is the moment of seeing the sun, the achievement of perfect wisdom. And just as the sun is difficult to look at directly, just as the freed prisoner must adjust gradually before he can gaze at the sun without being blinded, so the form of the good cannot be grasped suddenly or without preparation. It requires years of training, decades of study, a lifetime of philosophical discipline. But once achieved, this knowledge transforms everything. The person who has seen the form of the good no longer mistakes shadows for reality. She no longer values physical pleasures as if they were ultimate goods. She no longer fears death as if bodily existence were the only existence. She understands the true structure of reality and can order her life accordingly. She becomes wise not in the sense of knowing many facts, but in the sense of understanding what truly matters and what does not. And this brings us back to the allegory. Why must the freed prisoner return to the cave? Why can't he remain in the sunlight, contemplating forms, understanding reality as it truly is? Because knowledge of the good creates responsibility. The form of the good is not just an abstract principle. It is the source of value, the standard of rightness, the goal toward which everything should strive. And if you understand the good, you are obligated to attempt to bring others toward it, to help them escape ignorance, to liberate them from the cave, however difficult and dangerous that may be. This is not altruism in the modern sense. It is not self-sacrifice for the sake of others. It is something deeper and more compelling. When you truly understand the good, you understand that all souls are fundamentally oriented toward it, even when they mistake shadows for reality. You understand that the prisoners in the cave are not choosing ignorance. They are simply unaware that anything beyond shadows exists, and you understand that helping them toward knowledge is not imposing your values on them, but awakening them to what they already, deep down, desire, even if they do not yet know it. The philosopher returns to the cave because the form of the good demands it, not because someone commands her to return, not because she will be rewarded for returning, but because understanding the good means understanding that attempting to extend knowledge of the good to others is itself participation in the good. It is what the good requires. It is what reality itself, at its deepest level, calls for. Now, as you drift deeper into rest, consider what this means for you. What are the forms in your life? What perfect standards do you reference, consciously or unconsciously, when you judge particular instances? When you call something beautiful, what is the beauty you are measuring it against? When you call an act just, what is the justice it partially embodies? And beyond these particular forms, what is the good that gives them all meaning and value? These are not idle questions. They are invitations to the same ascent that the freed prisoner undertook. You do not need to travel to ancient Athens. You do not need to join Plato's academy. The journey from opinion to knowledge, from shadows to forms, from ignorance to wisdom, is available to you now, in the quiet darkness of approaching sleep, in the stillness of a mind temporarily freed from the constant demands of the sensory world. The forms are not far away. They are the deep structure of reality itself. They are what you have always been seeking, even when you did not know you were seeking anything at all. Every time you recognize beauty, you touch the form of beauty. Every time you admire justice, you brush against the form of justice. Every time you prefer truth to lies, you participate however slightly in the form of the good. The question is not whether the forms exist. The question is whether you will consciously pursue them. Whether you will treat the philosophic ascent as the defining project of your life, or whether you will remain content with shadows, with the comfortable illusions of the cave, with the easy opinions of the unexamined life. Plato cannot make this choice for you. No teacher, no guide, no philosopher can. The decision to turn away from the wall, to face the fire, to climb toward the light, belongs to each soul individually, but the possibility is always there, waiting, calling, inviting you to discover what is most real and most valuable, beyond all the changing particulars of daily experience. The forms are eternal. They will wait for you to notice them. The question is whether you will. Picture a warm Athenian evening in the month of Gamaliel, late winter of 416 before the Common Era. The sun has just set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. A group of men recline on couches in the spacious andron, the men's room, of the house belonging to Agathon, a successful tragic poet. He has just won first prize at the Lenaea festival, a significant achievement, and his friends have gathered to celebrate. These are not ordinary men. Among them is Aristophanes, the comic playwright whose satires of Athenian society remain hilarious 2 millennia later. There is Pausanias, a legal expert, and Eryximachus, a physician, both respected in their fields. And there, reclining somewhat awkwardly because he is perpetually uncomfortable with material comforts, is Socrates. He arrived late, as is his habit, having stopped in a neighbour's porch to think, standing motionless for who knows how long, lost in philosophical contemplation. They have eaten well, the servants have cleared away the dishes. Wine has been poured, mixed with water in the Greek custom. Normally this would be the time for serious drinking, for the symposium proper, the drinking party that follows the deipnon or dinner. But Eryximachus makes a suggestion. They are all still recovering from yesterday's celebration, he points out. Perhaps instead of drinking to excess tonight, they should entertain themselves with speeches. Agathon agrees, and a topic is chosen. They will each deliver an encomium, a speech in praise of love, specifically in praise of Eros, the god of desire, of longing, of the force that draws one being toward another. What follows is one of the most remarkable conversations in philosophical literature. Each speaker offers a different perspective on love, and together these perspectives build toward a vision of love that is profound, challenging, and ultimately transformative. It is a vision that has shaped Western understanding of love for 24 centuries, a vision that remains as relevant today as it was in that Athenian andron all those years ago. We will not recount every speech, though each has its merits. Instead, we will focus on 2 contributions that illuminate Plato's understanding of love and its relationship to philosophy, to the forms, and to the good life. The first is the speech of Aristophanes, which presents love through myth and image, in a way that has captured human imagination ever since. The second is the speech of Socrates, or rather, the speech that Socrates attributes to Diotima of Mantinea, a wise woman who supposedly taught him about love years earlier. Together, these 2 speeches offer complementary visions. Aristophanes explains why we desire love. Diotima explains what love truly is and where it should lead us. Aristophanes begins with a myth, a story from the ancient past, when human nature was different from what it is now. Back then, he says, there were 3 sexes, not 2. There were males, females, and androgynes, a third sex that combined characteristics of both. But the appearance of these original humans was strange and wonderful. Each human being was spherical in shape, with 4 arms and 4 legs, 2 faces on opposite sides of a single head, and 2 sets of reproductive organs. These round people moved not by walking, but by rolling, spinning like wheels across the ground. And these original humans were powerful, terrifyingly powerful. They had twice the strength of modern humans, twice the speed, twice the capability, and they knew it. In their pride and confidence, they decided to challenge the gods. They attempted to storm Olympus, to scale the heights where Zeus and the other immortals dwelt, to overthrow divine rule and establish themselves as the new masters of the cosmos. Zeus was troubled. He could not allow this rebellion to succeed, but he also did not want to destroy humanity entirely, as he had other rebellious creatures in the past. Humans, after all, offered sacrifices to the gods, and Zeus appreciated the worship and honor these sacrifices represented. So he devised a clever solution. He would weaken humanity without destroying it. He would split each round human in half. Zeus called Apollo, god of medicine and archery, to execute this punishment. Apollo took his bow and arrows and carefully, precisely, split every spherical human down the middle, separating the four-armed, four-legged creatures into two two-armed, two-legged beings. Then Apollo took the loose skin that resulted from this splitting and gathered it together at the front of each new creature, tying it off at what we now call the navel, leaving that peculiar scar as a permanent reminder of our original wholeness and subsequent division. But something unexpected happened after this splitting. The newly separated halves were miserable. Each half wandered the earth seeking its other half, the piece of itself that had been torn away. When two halves found each other, they would throw their arms around each other and cling together, refusing to separate even to eat or drink, content to starve to death if only they could remain united. They were dying of longing, dying of incompleteness. Zeus took pity on them. He moved the genitals around to the front of the body, allowing the halves to come together in sexual union. This provided some temporary relief, some momentary sense of completion, even though it could never fully restore the original unity. And from that day to this, Aristophanes concludes, love is the name we give to the desire and pursuit of wholeness. We are all seeking our other half, the piece of ourselves from which we were severed. And when we find it, or find someone who resembles it closely enough, we experience the overwhelming desire to unite with them, to become whole again, to overcome the separation that defines our existence. This is why love feels like recognition, Aristophanes explains. When you meet the right person, you feel like you have known them forever, like you are reuniting rather than meeting for the first time. This is why love creates such intense longing. You are not simply attracted to another person, you are reaching for the part of yourself that was taken away. This is why nothing else satisfies when you are in love. No amount of success or wealth or honor can fill the void left by separation from your other half. Only reunion can ease that primal pain. Aristophanes' myth is charming, humorous in its imagery of round people rolling across the ground, yet deeply serious in what it says about human nature. We are fundamentally incomplete. We are defined by lack, by absence, by the sense that something essential is missing. And we spend our lives seeking to overcome this incompleteness through connection with another. The myth of the soulmate, the idea that somewhere out there is the one person perfectly suited to us, the other half of our soul, originates here in Aristophanes' speech. But is this really what love is? Is it fundamentally about overcoming personal incompleteness? Is the goal of love to find someone who makes us whole? Socrates, speaking last among the symposiasts, offers a very different vision. He does so not in his own voice, but by recounting a conversation he once had with Diotima, a priestess from Mantinea, who initiated him into the mysteries of love. Socrates begins by challenging some assumptions made by earlier speakers. They have all praised love, as if love were a beautiful, perfect God. But Diotima asks, if love desires beauty and goodness, can love himself possess these qualities? We only desire what we lack. The hungry person desires food precisely because they do not have it. The poor person desires wealth precisely because they lack it. If love desires beauty, then love must not possess beauty. If love desires goodness, then love must not be good. So what is love then? Not a god, Diotima explains, but a daemon, a spirit intermediate between divine and mortal, between immortal and mortal, between wise and ignorant. Love was conceived, she tells Socrates, on the day of Aphrodite's birth. Poros, the god of resource, and Plenty, attended the feast celebrating the goddess's arrival. He drank too much nectar and fell asleep in Zeus's garden. Meanwhile, Penia, the personification of poverty and need, came begging at the feast's edge. Seeing Poros lying unconscious, Penia conceived a plan to ease her perpetual lack. She lay with the sleeping god and became pregnant with love. From his father Poros, love inherits resourcefulness, cleverness, the ability to devise means toward desired ends. From his mother Penia, love inherits neediness, longing, the constant awareness of lacking something essential. And this mixed nature defines what love is. Love is neither complete poverty nor complete wealth, neither total ignorance nor perfect wisdom, neither purely mortal nor purely divine. Love is in between, always seeking, always striving, always moving toward what it lacks, but never fully possessing it. This, Diotima insists, is what philosophers are. Philosophers are lovers of wisdom, which means they desire wisdom precisely because they do not possess it. The wise person, if such a person exists, would not philosophize because she would already have what philosophy seeks. The ignorant person, if truly and completely ignorant, would not philosophize because he would not know that he lacked anything. Philosophy exists in the space between ignorance and wisdom, perpetually reaching for understanding without ever fully grasping it, and this is the space that love inhabits. But what does love desire? What is the object of this perpetual longing? Beautiful things, Diotima answers at first, but then she probes deeper. Why do we desire beautiful things? What do we hope to gain from possessing them? Socrates fumbles for an answer, and Diotima guides him. We desire beautiful things because we want the good they provide, and we want the good because we want to be happy. And we want to be happy permanently, not just momentarily. What love ultimately desires is the permanent possession of the good. But mortals cannot achieve permanent possession of anything. We age, we change, we die. Everything we grasp slips away eventually. So how can love, this desire for permanent possession of the good, ever be satisfied? Through reproduction, Diotima answers. Through creating something that outlasts us. This is why animals and humans feel such intense drive to reproduce. It is not simply biological instinct, though biology expresses it. It is a spiritual need, a desire for immortality, for permanence, for creating something that will continue after our temporary existence ends. But reproduction is not only physical. There is spiritual reproduction, intellectual reproduction, reproduction in soul rather than body. And this spiritual reproduction is higher than physical reproduction, more noble, more valuable, because its offspring are more lasting and more beneficial than mere children of flesh. Consider Homer. Diotima suggests he died thousands of years ago, but his poems remain. They educate generation after generation. They shape souls and inspire virtue. Are these poems not better offspring than biological children, who themselves die after a single lifetime? Consider Lycurgus and Solon, the great lawgivers. Their laws brought justice and order to entire cities. These laws are their children, offspring of their minds rather than their bodies, and these children have granted them immortality in memory and honor. This begins to reveal the true nature of love. Love is not simply desire for another person. Love is desire for immortality through creative production, and the highest form of this creative production is giving birth not to bodies, but to ideas, not to physical offspring, but to wisdom, virtue, beauty, justice. The philosopher seeks to give birth to true ideas. The politician seeks to give birth to just laws. The artist seeks to give birth to beautiful creations. All of these are expressions of love in its highest form. But Diotima is not finished. She has described what love does and why. Now she reveals where love should lead, the path it should follow, the ascent it makes possible. And here the Symposium's teaching explicitly connects with the theory of forms and the allegory of the cave. Love is the force that carries the soul, from the realm of shadows to the realm of forms, from the many to the one, from changing particulars to eternal perfection. The journey begins, Diotima explains, with attraction to a single beautiful body. A young person sees another young person and feels desire. This is love in its most basic, most accessible form. Physical attraction to physical beauty. There is nothing wrong with this beginning. It is where love naturally starts for embodied beings like us. But if the lover is wise, he will not remain at this level. He will notice that the beauty in this one body is similar to the beauty in other bodies. He will realize that beauty itself, the thing he responds to, is not unique to this one person, but appears in many persons. And gradually, his love will expand from this single body to beautiful bodies in general. He will love bodily beauty as such, not just this particular instance of it. Next, if he continues to ascend, he will notice that the beauty of the soul is more valuable than the beauty of the body. A person with a beautiful character, someone virtuous and wise, is more genuinely beautiful than a person with an attractive physique. And so the lover's focus shifts from physical beauty to spiritual beauty, from the body to the soul. He begins to love people not for their appearance, but for their character, their wisdom, their virtue. Continuing upward, the lover will discover beauty in activities and laws and institutions. He will see that a just law is beautiful, that a noble custom is beautiful, that a harmonious society is beautiful, and his love expands again to encompass not just individual beautiful souls, but the beautiful structures that souls create together. From here, the ascent becomes more abstract, but also more profound. The lover discovers beauty in different kinds of knowledge, in mathematics and science and philosophy. He sees that true ideas are beautiful, that understanding itself is beautiful, that knowledge possesses an attractiveness that transcends any physical or institutional beauty. And finally, if he persists, if he climbs the entire ladder of love, he will arrive at something extraordinary. He will have a vision of beauty itself, the form of beauty, eternal and perfect, unchanging and absolute. This beauty is not beautiful in some respects and ugly in others. It is not beautiful at one time and ugly at another. It is not beautiful to some people and ugly to others. It is simply, absolutely, eternally beautiful. It is the source and standard of all particular beautiful things, the reason anything else can be beautiful at all. And when the lover beholds this form of beauty, Diotima says, he will understand what he has been seeking all along. Every particular, beautiful thing he loved was beautiful only because it participated in this form, only because it imperfectly reflected this eternal beauty. His love was always for this form, even when he did not know it, even when he mistakenly believed he loved only the particular beautiful body or soul he first encountered. At this final stage, the lover can contemplate beauty itself and give birth, spiritually, to true virtue and wisdom. He becomes productive in a way he never was before, creating not mere images or opinions about goodness, but actual virtue, actual wisdom, because he is now in contact with what is actually good and beautiful, rather than with pale copies of these realities. And because he is in contact with what is immortal and eternal, he himself achieves a kind of immortality. Not literal bodily immortality, but immortality through his spiritual offspring, through the wisdom and virtue he creates and passes to others, through his participation in something that transcends the mortal realm. This is love according to Plato, according to Diotima, according to the vision presented in the Symposium. Love is not fundamentally about finding someone to complete you. It is not about overcoming personal inadequacy through union with another. It is about ascent. It is about using the natural human capacity for desire, for longing, for reaching beyond oneself, as a ladder that leads from the physical to the spiritual, from the particular to the universal, from the temporal to the eternal. Love begins with physical attraction, yes, but it should not end there. The lover who remains fixated on a single beautiful body is like the prisoner who remains focused on one particular shadow. He has mistaken the first step for the destination. He has stopped climbing when the ladder still stretches infinitely above him. The truly philosophical lover uses each level of beauty as a stepping stone to the next, never resting, always ascending, always seeking the beauty that lies beyond all particular beautiful things. And this explains the connection between love and philosophy. Philosophy is love of wisdom. Wisdom is knowledge of what is truly good and truly beautiful. Knowledge of what is truly good and beautiful requires ascending from particulars to forms, from the many to the one, from the physical realm to the intelligible realm. Love provides the motivation, the energy, the driving force for this ascent. Without love, without desire, without longing for something beyond what we currently possess, we would have no reason to climb, no motivation to question, no drive to seek truth. Philosophy is love directed toward its highest object, and love is philosophy's engine, the power that moves souls from ignorance toward knowledge, from the cave into the light, from shadows to reality. Now, as sleep begins to pull you under, consider your own loves. What do you desire? What attracts you? What do you long for with the intensity that defines genuine love? And more importantly, are you using these desires as a ladder, or have you mistaken the lowest rung for the top? Are you climbing toward beauty itself, toward goodness itself, toward the forms that give all particular things whatever beauty and goodness they possess? Or are you clinging to one particular beautiful thing, refusing to see that its beauty points beyond itself, refusing to climb higher? The ladder is always there. Diotima's teaching, Plato's vision, remains available to anyone willing to ascend. You do not need to abandon earthly loves. You do not need to reject physical beauty or deny your attraction to particular people. But you can learn to see these loves as beginnings rather than endings, as invitations to climb rather than destinations, at which to stop. Love begins in the body. Love ends in eternity. The question is whether you will make the journey, whether you will trust love enough to carry you beyond the comfortable and familiar into the vast and frightening realm of perfect beauty that exists beyond all changing, dying, imperfect, beautiful things. The ladder stands before you. Diotima calls from above. And love, that resourceful and needy daemon, stands ready to guide you upward, if only you will let him.